Questions and Answers for a World in Crisis, from the words of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Adverse Forces, Part 3. From the Mother. Question. Why do people say that it is easier to do bad things than good ones? Mother. They say so, but it is not always true, and it depends on people. I knew people, not many, but still, for whom it was impossible to do anything bad. Everything in their nature revolted at the idea of doing harm. The spontaneous movement was completely against this. But this is rare. Still, it does exist. This happens because the world, as it is at present, is still largely under the influence of the adverse forces, particularly the vital force, which is dynamic and generally makes you act. This force is largely under the influence of the adverse vital, that is, forces which like to hurt, destroy, damage. That kind of will to spoil things. When one sees something beautiful, instead of admiring, loving, being happy, wishing that it grows and progresses, which is the true divine movement, one feels a sort of anger, rage. One wants to destroy, one wants to damage. This is the movement of the adverse forces. Unfortunately, this is quite spontaneous in many people, and even in children, the instinct to destroy and spoil. Well, it is the presence of the adverse forces. And these are forces which come directly from the vital world and incarnate on earth in human consciousness, and at times also in animal consciousness. It is the hatred for things beautiful, for what is pure, what is good, what is true. It is the hatred of the divine presence. And naturally, with this hatred, the will to destroy and damage, to spoil, mar, deform, disfigure. One step more, and it is the will to inflict suffering. And all this is the influence of the adverse forces, which acts quite spontaneously in the inconscient, in the subconscious, in half-consciousness. It is only the pure and luminous consciousness which can oppose this and prevent it from acting. But the state of the world is such that this is a constant battle. Very few people can escape from this hold. Everyone, generally, has a tiny little corner in him, at times quite small, at times bigger, sometimes quite unconscious, sometimes a little conscious, sometimes superbly, completely conscious, which likes destroying, likes spoiling. And the state of the world is such that when one gives way to that, one is helped by an onrush of forces which lie waiting for the opportunity, waiting for the moment to be able to manifest, which need human collaboration to be able to manifest and seek it. As soon as the opportunity comes, they rush forth, throwing out a formidable amount of energy. And so one feels stronger as soon as one begins to do evil. That is why it is easier, whilst if one wants to react, refuses to become the instrument of these forces, one must fight hard. Be very strong, very straight, very pure, very sincere, and above all, not egoistic. One must not turn round upon oneself and must never be afraid. And this is not easy. That is, the world is in such a state that in order never to be moved by the adverse forces, the forces of darkness, destruction, wickedness, hatred, one must be a hero, a true hero, who is not afraid of blows and fears nothing, who never turns round upon himself and doesn't have that kind of self-pity which is so despicable a thing. Okay. That is why, in order not to do evil, think evil, wish evil, never under any circumstances, one must be a hero. It is not always easy to be a hero. The days one is tired, the days one wants to rest, not to make any effort, one slips. Everything slips down. It is terribly slippery. It is more slippery than a children's toboggan. One slides down, down like that, down in a whirlwind. And it is only when one is right at the bottom that one realizes that one has come down. Then one must climb back. That is not always comfortable. But for one who has faith in the divine grace, the return to the light becomes easy. This last sentence was added by Mother in September 1969, when this talk was published for the first time. From Sri Aurobindo. This yoga is a spiritual battle. Its very attempt raises all sorts of adverse forces, and one must be ready to face difficulties, sufferings, reverses of all sorts in a calm, unflinching spirit. The difficulties that come are ordeals and tests, and if one meets them in the right spirit, one comes out stronger and spiritually purer and greater. No misfortune can come. The adverse forces cannot touch or be victorious unless there is some defect in oneself, some impurity, weakness, or, at the very least, ignorance. One should then seek out this weakness in oneself and correct it. When there is an attack from the human instruments of adverse forces, one should try to overcome it not in a spirit of personal hatred or anger or wounded egoism, but with a calm spirit of strength and equanimity, and a call to the divine force to act. Success or failure lies with the divine. A progress made often stirs the adverse forces to activity. They want to diminish its effect as much as possible. When you get a decisive experience of this kind, you should remain concentrated and assimilated, avoiding self-dispersion and all externalizing of the consciousness. The things enumerated are not the causes of the attacks, but they are the occasion, the weakness in the sadhaks that allows them when they could very well be dismissed. The hostile forces are there in the world to maintain the ignorance. They were there in the sadhana because they had the right to test the sincerity of the sadhaks in their power and will to cleave to the divine and overcome all difficulties. But this is only so long as the higher light has not descended into the physical. Now it is descending. It is sufficiently there for anyone to receive it more and more fully, so that the way becomes smooth and open, a progressive development and not a struggle. You are right. The hostile forces, their attacks, their suggestions ought now to be superannuated, out of date, out of place here in this sadhana. If somebody would realize that and fulfill it in his sadhana, the others might perhaps get strength to follow. At present, these things are still here, because the sadhaks open themselves to them out of habit, out of desire, out of attraction for the drama of the vital, out of fear, out of passive response and unresisting inertia. But there is no real necessity for them any longer, or true justification for their presence here. The outer world is a different matter. The sadhana could very well go on, and should go on, as an unfolding, a natural falling away of defects and difficulties, a coming of greater and greater light and power and transformation.